Come on now.
Hey guys.
It's just a fight.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Here at the Swamp, get ready to beat LSU. Y'all tune in to Rule Number One podcast on Monday.
Yeah! And we are back. If you can't notice, we are not in our studio today. We are out here at the KT Foundation Sunshine, Music and Barbecue Festival, partner.
Yeah, we're so excited. We had the opportunity last week to do a live podcast from the Coop, and we got to interview Miss Chick, and it was very cool. But we're so excited to go on the road again and be able to do this in front of everybody. And I think we're going to air this episode in 2 weeks, so y'all will be able to listen to it again if you missed it or missed parts of it.
So if you're wondering who we are, we're two guys from Polk County who started this thing about 4 months ago. And, we kind of asked ourselves, what is going to set us apart from other shows in the area? And we thought about, we want to find the extraordinary and the ordinary person. All these podcasts have famous guests on, famous backgrounds or whatever. And, we wanted to focus on, people who have interesting stories that can be found, anywhere and everywhere. And go ahead.
Yeah, we've had all different kinds of guests, like Brian said. We've had professional athletes on. We've had sales executives, a flight attendant, all different kinds of people in all different walks of life. And without further ado, we have another very special guest.
Yeah, today with us we have Coach Jeff Sikes of the Warner University baseball team. How you doing, Coach?
I'm doing great, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you for coming on. You've been one of our main guests that we've wanted to get on this show. We didn't know if you even knew what a podcast was when we first mentioned it. And, as soon as I texted you, you were in. And I texted Smo, I called him, I was like, we got our guy for the event. We were so excited because we know that you have some pretty deep roots here in the town of Lake Wales.
No doubt. I was born and raised here in Lake Wales. I actually can see my mother's house across the lake over there.
That's awesome.
I spent my whole life here other than when I was in college, yeah.
Very nice, very nice. Well, a little background. We kind of want to get to know you as a person and how you got to where you are now, head baseball coach of the Warner Royals. So did you go to Lake Wales High School?
I went to Lake Wales High School, elementary school, middle school, junior high, all the way finished up at Lake Wales High School, yes.
Okay, and then where'd you go to college after that?
Well, out of high school, I signed a baseball scholarship to go to Mississippi State University. And that's where
Hail State.
That's where I went, yeah.
Hail State. Back to the high school thing, you played two sports. I heard that you were a dang good quarterback, too, back in the day when you wore the black and orange for Lake Wales.
Well, I played quarterback. I don't know how good I was, but I played quarterback with some great guys.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm so excited to have you on. You are our baseball coach, and that, you played such an important role in our lives and our development and, the character that we, developed over our 4 or 5 years that we spent at Warner. And you can see a lot of that in all the episodes that we do. We always, what I've taken from you is we, see the best in everybody. And that's how you are. And I'm so thankful, Coach, for you coming on today. Do you want to get into our first question for the guy?
Yeah. So you mentioned you went to Mississippi State. You went to a couple different colleges, correct?
Right. I started off at Mississippi State, was excited to go there, and ended up only staying a semester. And the reason is mainly because I didn't realize it at the time, but I really wasn't ready to do that. Mm-hmm. I was an only child. So, I got out there to Mississippi, and it was a terrific place, but I was homesick beyond belief. I really was. I had a hard time dealing with that. And it affected the way that I played ball out there. I don't think I played as well as I was capable of, and ultimately didn't make the team and didn't deserve to make the team. Mm-hmm. And so that was a big disappointment there at Mississippi State. But the team that I didn't make ended up going to Omaha, was in the World Series that year. So I felt, okay, well, at least it wasn't chopped liver that I didn't make the team. So then I ended up having to transfer from there.
Where'd you go from there?
I ended up transferring to South Florida State, which is right down the road here in Avon Park, and played junior college ball in that spring, and then the following year ended up playing 2 years down there. Really enjoyed playing there. Made some great friends there that I still have today, and my freshman year, we were runner-up in the state. We were in the state championship game and ended up runner-up in that game. And my senior year, individually, ended up being a lot better for me, and then the way I performed, and presented some other opportunities to go on beyond junior college.
So you're a JUCO bandit is the new nickname for all the JUCO guys coming out. My dad actually played JUCO ball at Polk State College, and he won a state championship there and got to go out to play in a regional. He didn't make it to Grand Junction, but he talks about how, the JUCO route for some guys is the perfect way to go. It's a, stepping stone for smaller high school guys to, get used to the college, kind of things, but also had that small school vibe where they're not overwhelmed by the size of a school like Mississippi State, or I'm pretty sure you went to Kentucky too, right?
Well, I finished at Kentucky. Yeah.
Awesome. But it's that's what he was telling me. It was a good stepping stone for young men to develop the maturity and the, I guess, will and determination baseball-wise, while also being in a small environment where you're not going to get in too much trouble. Speaking of which, I did get in trouble at my first school, and I kind of felt what you said about the going away. I went to Ave Maria University down in Naples, and I just didn't fit in there. Sore thumb. It was so bad, and like you said, it affected my playing too. And I didn't get the best out of it. My freshman year, they had a JV and a varsity team. I got bumped up and down all year long, and it killed my confidence. I didn't know what to do, and so I went back for my sophomore year trying to give it a new shot, and it didn't work out for me, and that's okay. Like I want to tell people that are going into baseball that it's okay to transfer. Sometimes when you sign, it might just be, well, I'll be honest. When I signed with Ave, I looked at the campus. I was like, this is beautiful. Like this is where I want to be. I didn't take into consideration the factors of teaching, what they offer, majors, and stuff like that. And I think that is, what guys need to look more to when they're deciding to commit to a college.
Yeah, I do have a question for you, Coach. You mentioned, going off to Mississippi State and how it was a big transition. Do you think that time period at your junior college was a big help to be able to go off to Kentucky after those 2 years?
Well, I think all three places were beneficial to me, no doubt. Even going to Mississippi, when I had the opportunity to go there, I prayed about that. I prayed about, hey, Lord, please tell me where to go to college. Mm-hmm. And please help me to know that. But, I was a little full of myself, and I prayed for it, but I didn't really listen to him. Right. So I kind of, in retrospect, I don't think he really wanted me to go there. Love the people there, and the folks there were great. But I wasn't ready for it, and I didn't realize it because I was too full of myself, like I said. So then coming back to junior college was a humbling process for me, not from the standpoint of the level of competition. Level of competition is fantastic. But just to kind of say, okay, you talk about, being a Christian and being a believer, and you pray for something, pray to the Lord for something. You're not even listening to what he has to say to you there. And so that kind of program me or kind of balance me back out to where I needed to be able to hear going forward. And when I came out of high school, I was recruited by a lot of different schools. One of the schools I was recruited by was University of Kentucky then. And as it turned out, when I came out of junior college, there was only one Division I college that recruited me, when there were several before coming out of high school, and the one that was still there after junior college was Kentucky. And when I got to Kentucky, I was made to be there. That was where I should have gone right out of high school, and absolutely love Kentucky.
Isn't it weird how, the Lord works, in my opinion? Because, I had the same, troubles too. When I left Ave, I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what direction I was going to head in. I didn't know if I was even going to play baseball again at that point. I got in some trouble. I'm going to, you might not know this, but I failed a drug test down there. I was stupid. I was young, running with the wrong crowd. But I came back home, and I, took some time to, try to figure it out. And I was out actually working in the groves outside of Lake Wells here, and my dad made me work out there. It wasn't like a job that I went and, got. It was a punishment. So I was on my hands and knees fixing like poly pipe and all the irrigation underneath the orange trees all summer long. And I was like, all right, this is not what I want to do. I have to get back into college baseball. I have to, I had to get my head on straight. And I was thinking, I was like, man, what's a perfect place around here for me to, find myself again, find, close to home where I, don't go wild. That happens to people. They go off to places, they get wild. Oh, well, but it was like my calling, I guess, for Warner. I reached out to you sometime in July. I also talked to Weber across the lake, too. Coach Polk over there was trying to talk me into going over there. But like you said, I just had that, I guess, calling. I prayed about it, and, Warner was my decision, and I'm so thankful for that. Man, Coach, I'm so excited that you're here.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like Warner also, they preach us all the time. They're like, there's a reason why you're here. You've told us that for the 4 years I played for you. And I felt like that was a big part of my life whenever I came out of high school. I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go. I wanted to get an ag degree, and the only other school in the state of Florida that really offers one is University of Florida, and I didn't think I was that good to go there. And so I decided to go to Warner, and my story was a little bit different. I stayed there for 4 years, and I absolutely loved every bit of it. Well, we've talked a little bit about how you hopped around schools. What is some of your favorite parts of each school, and what parts kind of grew you into the person you are?
Well, and just to kind of finish up what you guys just said there, I think a lot of times, we have guys come to Warner in our situation, and it was fantastic having both of you guys. I remember the first time I met both of you, and remember that whole recruiting process. But what happens a lot of times is guys come to Warner, maybe they transfer in like we've been talking about, and when they get done, they say, Coach, I loved it here. I wish I would have come here right out of high school, right from the beginning. And the thing that we share with most of those guys is that, listen, your experiences after high school is what shaped you to a point where you could appreciate your experience here at Warner. Had you come right out of high school, you may not have appreciated it the way that you do now.
That is very true. I never really thought about that.
That's common. But the things that I liked at all three of the schools that I went to was that, first in Mississippi, the people are fantastic. And, for the most part, they have a very large agricultural influence there. That's of their curriculum. It's a lot about agriculture, and so I enjoyed that aspect of it. And just the fact that you knew you were in, even today, a big-time college baseball program.
Yeah,
and that was exciting to know that. Like I said, just wasn't ready for it. But then back at JUCO, the thing that I enjoyed the most was that playing with a lot of guys that I had played against in high school or that I heard about in high school, and just making relationships with those folks because, in those days, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have the ability to communicate with someone in another town, even remotely. And so you read about these guys' names in the papers, and then to be able to play with them and realize they're regular guys and you have these experiences together, that was the best part about going to junior college here in Avon Park. And but then at UK, like I said, it fit me like a glove at UK. I just the families that I would connect with up there. I've got, even now I have folks that I call my Kentucky family, that type of thing. Great guys, Kentucky guys that I communicate with regularly. My head coach up there was Keith Madison. I actually came to know Keith Madison because my junior year in high school, he was the head coach at Lake Wales.
Really?
And then he went from Lake Wales to be a graduate assistant at Mississippi State, which is one of the main things that got me to Mississippi State. But by the time I got there, he had already left and gone to Kentucky.
Man,
and
that's
so
crazy.
that was a good contact for me to have, and it's beautiful. You just can't grasp hold of how beautiful Kentucky is until you spend some time there. So I feel very blessed to have graduated from UK.
You mentioned a little bit about how the times were different, with the telephone and everything back then. Is there a specific thing that baseball was different back then, like the game itself? Or can you talk a little bit how it's transitioned since then into the game we play now?
Sure. So far as the game is concerned, the game is over 150 years old. Right. So there's not that much different about the game. I mean, it's still 9 innings. It's still 3 outs. It's still whoever scores the most runs. So the game itself, there's not that much difference, I don't really believe. I think the main thing you see in college is that the level of players is higher now. You have better players that are playing college ball now than when I played. If you were drafted in the top, say, 15 rounds when I came out of high school, the vast majority of those guys are going to end up playing professional baseball right out of high school. That's the route they were going to go. Well, of that same group of guys now in the top 15 rounds, you're going to see at least 2/3 of them end up playing college baseball.
Right.
And at those levels, the facilities that they have they're basically professional facilities.
They are.
So much different than what my experience was. But I think even from a coaching standpoint, the biggest differences just day to day is analytics is such a much larger part of it. Social media is a big part of it. Even the way you communicate with folks with texting and Twitter and all that sort of stuff. Those are probably as big of differences as anything. And just the fact that you can have a conversation with someone like that because of social media is much different from all the machinations you had to go through to be able to get hold of somebody way back.
I think, I'm glad you mentioned that, like the social media aspect going into baseball. Go back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was no such thing as a bat flip in the MLB. If you had a bat flip in the MLB, you're probably getting a 95-mile-per-hour fastball on the shoulder, or the guy behind you is going to get it, and they were going to be mad at you. Nowadays, you see, guys hit a 450-foot home run, and they're throwing their bat higher than the stands, and they're flashy around the bases. They look flashier. I mean, how do you feel about that? I know you're pretty old school when it comes to being things on the diamond.
Well, those type of things definitely are not my favorite part of the game for sure, but they do exist. I mean, you're right about that. They're much more prevalent. And you can see how guys react on the other teams. I mean, they still have that, you may get one, behind your head type thing. So I just I appreciate the idea of the individual expression. I appreciate that, and
people like the emotion behind it.
Exactly, and people are excited. Guys are excited when they've accomplished something, and want to express the fact that they're excited. So I appreciate that. At the same time, I'm much more focused on the fact that there's something called sportsmanship.
Yeah,
that was, I do think, more prevalent back when I was younger and played than there is now. There's more kind of in your face type of responses back and forth, and that's something that I don't feel is positive for the game, and yet it's very real.
Right. In those 4 years that Brian and I did play for you, that was a big thing that you always instilled in us, that you have to have good character. You have to, carry yourself appropriately, whether we had a haircut rule or a facial hair rule, which I'm not really following that anymore. But I wanted to move a little bit about your coaching, philosophy and everything. How did you originally get the job at Warner?
Well, when I graduated from Kentucky, I had a year where I worked with the Doyle Baseball School.
Okay.
The Doyles were, Denny Doyle, Brian Doyle, Blake Doyle. Denny Doyle played 10 years in the major leagues, played in the 75 World Series. Brian Doyle, he was the MVP of the 77 World Series, and then their brother Blake, or Brian's twin, Blake played all the way up to AAA and then a little bit in the big leagues and that type of thing.
Talk about some genetics there. Oh, my gosh.
So they actually, when they started a baseball school after they had retired, they connected with my father, actually. He was president of First Federal Savings and Loan here, and connected with them about and he had also been the president of Lake Wales Little League when I was growing up. So they connected with him about a place to start their school and how to get some funding and that type of thing. And my dad helped a little bit with that just to help them get going. And I had known them from there. And so they thankfully gave me an opportunity to work and stay in baseball for a year then. And after about that year, the way I got to Warner was I got a call from the coach down at Warner then. Now, you got to remember, Warner at that point had about 200 students total. And he called me and he says, hey, man, he worked with the post office. He said, I'm taking this job in Ohio with the post office, and I need you to, coach these guys down here. And I said, man, I don't want to do that. I don't care anything about coaching. I said, I love playing, but I don't want to coach. And so he kept saying, hey, they're great guys. You'd love these guys. You would just really connect with them in such a great way, and we need you to do it. It's only it's kind of like coaching summer ball late in the afternoon, that type of thing. You could do it. And I kept saying, no, man, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So finally, he said, well, listen. And remember, this is a landline. There's no cell phone. You got the cord into the wall and that type of thing. And he said, well, will you at least pray about it? And I said, yeah, I'll pray about it, mainly just so I can hang the phone up. I would have said about anything to be able to hang the phone up at that point. So once I did, I said, well, I don't want to have lied to the guy, so I will pray about it. So I did pray about it, and finally I'm saying, Lord kind of impressed upon my heart, hey, listen, you can do it. They're going to be good guys. It's, it'll be a good experience for you. Go ahead and do it. And so I did. And there were 14 players on the team. Man, the schedule was like 17 games is total. It was just kind of almost glorified club ball. But these guys on this team were 14 of the greatest guys you could ever know. I ended up there were 2 guys on that team that ended up being in my wedding. One of them is Rob Quam, who's the director of the Lake Wales Care Center in town, and most anyone in Lake Wales knows who Rob is.
I've met Rob before.
Yep, and just some terrific friends that I still have today. So then once I was there and we had a couple of years like that, you start to say, well, you know what? If I'm going to do this, maybe we need to do it right. Maybe we need to start doing some other things that make it look more like a college program. So that's kind of how it all cranked up.
I love that because you've been the guy at Warner now for what, 40, 30 something, 35 plus years or something like that, or you probably know the exact number.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's a long time. But to see the growth that program has made, like I saw pictures, from when it first started, the young Coach Sikes and his 14 guys. I've seen pictures, and it's like you see the field and you see everything. It's like, man, how did that become to, what we have today with the beautiful, grandstands and the big scoreboard? Very nice playing surface. Probably one of the best in the Sun Conference, I will say.
From all those days pulling crabgrass.
Yeah. But, you said earlier that going to Kentucky kind of fit like a glove. When you were at Warner, you are a very Christian man. You are very, out about it, and you help. You talk to us about it at school and at practice, and I really appreciate that. I know a lot of the other guys did too. Did that kind of like fit like a glove too? Being that Warner is a Christian university, and it is evangelical Christian is what you said. Yeah, I remember it. And so what I'm asking is how perfect of a fit was that for you when you got there? Like, did you want to go anywhere else, or when I got to Warner, that was it. Like, I don't want to coach anywhere else.
Well, it was indeed a perfect fit. There's no question about that. And the fact that Warner is an evangelical Christian university has such a big deal to do with it. It's a place where not only are you allowed to share your faith in Christ, you're encouraged to do it. They desire you to do it. And when we talk with recruits, we talk about, our top priority at Warner. We're very competitive. You put lines on the field and turn the lights on, let's go.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're ready. So, but in the big picture of things, or the big scheme of things, our top priority is that we want to try to do anything and everything we can do to glorify Jesus Christ. And so we're going to do that with our attitudes on the field and off the field and in the classroom and in the community. And it doesn't mean that every kid that comes there is a Christian kid or that they have to be a Christian kid to come there. But it does mean that that's our priority, and that's going to reveal itself or be reflected in the way that we communicate with our players and the way we present ourselves as a team, and the effort that we put into it to do it in a way that hopefully God is pleased by. And we don't get it right every day. I'm not going to sit here and say we don't ever trip up and make some mistakes, but that's where our heart is. And the fact that that's always been the MO for Warner Athletics and especially Warner Baseball, that's some of the type of things that have kept me there, because I just, it's like fuel to me. I just feed off of that. So
I love that. You spoke a little bit about your 14 guys, your original 14 guys. How was you've told me a couple different stories. How was the competition level with those 14 guys?
Well, I mean, it was much different than what we have now, as you can imagine. It was all just, small Christian schools. There weren't any scholarships. There wasn't a ton of recruiting that you could do, at that point. It was okay, but it was probably better than you might think it would have been. But, it wasn't anything that was going to blow you away.
Right.
But it was just a lot of guys that wanted to continue to play ball when they got out of high school, and that whole idea about when you get to a school, you walk around the cafeteria trying to find guys to play. That was true. And just, hey, ever think about playing baseball? That type of thing.
I remember. Can you tell us that story? Because I remember you mentioning that, like, at practice one day. We did not believe you. Go ahead, tell us. I want to hear that. Yeah.
Well, you start off with a few guys playing, like we said, 14, but going to that, to that next year, the second year that I was there, and you started to know more people around campus, literally are walking around campus and looking at guys, that guy, hey, did you ever play? If a guy looked kind of athletic or whatever, you say, did you ever play any sports in high school? And what did you play? I played basketball and baseball. And I said, well, did you ever think about trying to play here? And so there were multiple guys like that you trying to talk into playing so you'd have enough to field the team.
I love that.
That's so cool because, looking back at it, back-to-back years, you've had regional opening round tournament games. You've built this program literally from nothing to, a team that's ranked in the top 25 I'd say every year, but seems like, every year, especially from, 2000 to 2010. How did you get into, the development of the program? You started bringing in higher end guys, and you made the World Series in 2003 or 2002? 2001.
Yep.
And, how did that, when did you start seeing the, oh man, I'm building something here. I'm getting something.
Well, I shared with you when I first started, I kind of did it like that in the first 3 years, that it would be kind of an after work type of thing. I worked in a side business my dad had, and then I'd go down there after work. I worked some insurance and that type of thing, and I'd go down there after work there. But after about 3 years, our team in my third year was actually ticked up a little bit. It was a little better than what we'd had before, a little stronger. And so in that fourth year, we didn't have anything to recruit with, but the main thing we recruited with was the experience that these guys were having, how much fun they were having, kind of barriers that we were breaking down to advance the program further, and that we were, try to elevate our schedule and played some stronger schools and that type of thing. So just by word of mouth, just to get some guys to come. So even then, the program ticked up a little bit then in those couple of years there. But we had a fellow come to be our athletic director in my sixth or seventh year, I guess it was. Gary Bays was his name. It's still his name. And he was the one that really pushed or encouraged the school towards trying to join the NAI, to play fully legitimate competition, and then beyond that, ways that beginning to give scholarships to players not only would help our teams to get better, but ultimately would help grow the school, and the total revenues would be enhanced by giving, some revenue on the lower end to athletes. And so that's really where it kind of turned to NAI and really began to go a little bit in that regard.
Yeah, you mentioned, you walking around campus and recruiting guys to come up. How has your recruiting process changed from then? Now we live in the 21st century where you can contact people from all over the world. I mean, you recruit guys from the Dominican Republic. How do you go about your recruiting process now compared to back then?
Well, for one thing, we have great coaches that coach with me. I mean, that's a huge part. I mean, Dave Moskovitz, he coaches with me. He's our associate head coach, and he really is the head honcho in recruiting. He's our recruiting coordinator, you could say. Aaron Karras, he's our pitching coach, and Aaron's involved in recruiting, and even with John Bean is coaching with us this year, and then we really are blessed this year to have Bryce Hewlett with us, and Bryce is a local baseball hero and played junior college ball, played at Pittsburgh, the Pitt Panthers. And
I don't know if you know this or not. Me and Bryce, we go way back. So, I played, Little League with him. He came over to Fort Meade one year, and then we started playing travel ball together. We played all the way up to we were 13, 14, and we knew each other throughout high school and college. But, as soon as I saw that, hey, I'm going to be the GA at Warner, I was like, man, these guys, it's still building, it's getting better and better and better each year, it seems. And I'm just so excited to see where, you guys are heading, because, I was part of the two teams that, I don't want to say put us back on the map. I hate to say that, because, Warner was a part of the map. I think, 2000 to 2010, you guys were in the top 25 every week except, twice or something like that?
We had 6 weeks in the decade that we were not ranked.
Yeah. In 10 years, that's insane. 6 weeks out of 10 years, you were not a top 25 team. That's mind-boggling. That's Alabama type stuff. Yeah. And I just love to see the commitment and the drive for this program, because it literally started off with nothing. And you were the guy that started it. And it's just so nice to see, what work ethic and hard drive and, what it can produce. Me and Nate want to do this Rule 1 podcast, kind of for the rest of our lives. And, we want this to be our main source of income one day, our job. But, that's what you instilled in us through your coaching method. You instilled in us hard work, don't give up, chase your dreams. Take 3 big things that me and him take, every day that we use. Speaking of your coaching method, you kind of have, a different style of coaching. You have, some coaches out there, if somebody messes up, they're going to get in your face. They're going to yell, they're going to cuss. You are the exact opposite. It was a whole whirlwind for me. Do you want to touch on your coaching method and how you feel it's definitely different, but how do you, I guess kind of look at it to groom guys?
Well, sure. And even to finish the point about the recruiting, I mean, having those guys, which are great evaluators of talent, in their own right, they know what they're doing. And you connect with a lot of people. I mean, my network of coaches that I know in high school and in junior college, I mean, there's a lot of guys. I mean, you coach for a long time, you get to know a lot of different people. Yeah. And so there's a lot more people that call and say, hey, I have a guy for you. Hey, there's a guy that you need to look at. There's a lot more of that going on. But, I'm an old timer, so all of those guys that I mentioned are way more proficient, with technology and social media and that type of thing. So still go to a lot of games. I mean, those guys especially, they go to a lot more games than I do and seeing guys play. But just with video that you get and some of the analytics and the technology where you can tell us about a guy that played junior college ball in Nebraska, and we have technology that can pull video of him up and see him playing. That's way beyond what we used to have. But so far as coaching style and stuff, from the beginning, my goal was to try to coach the way that I would have wanted to be coached. And in some ways, I was coached that way. I mean, I mentioned Coach Madison at Kentucky. I mean, I think my style is a lot like his style, and a lot of it picked up from him, obviously, from learning under him. But I kind of just wanted to be coached the way that I wanted to be coached, and I wanted to focus on areas that were relevant. I think a lot of times things that coaches spend time on are more traditional, more so than they are relevant. Mm-hmm. And so you got to be current, and you have to go with what's working and what's going to motivate guys to do it in a certain way. And just kind of a general one-sentence type thing, it's always been focused on taking care of the things you have control over. There's things in and around a practice or game or just life that you don't have control over. We know that. I mean, focus on what you have control over, handle those things as well as you can, and if you do those little things and if you take care of those building block type of things, then when you have something major come along, you're a lot more prepared to handle that and to deal with that as a team or as an individual player. And so, you hope at the end of the day that guys enjoyed playing for you and that they were challenged and that they were held accountable to a point that they were able to grow from that and still had a lot of fun playing. And if we do that, then we feel pretty good about, what happens. So, and so much of it too, guys, is that I tell folks this all the time. They'll say, well, your players are this or that, and, about how the quality young men and that type of thing. And the thing I'll say, and this is just true, I said, well, it's because they were raised right. You know? I mean, I didn't raise any of them. Both you guys, you have tremendous parents, you know that. And so many of our guys have just had terrific upbringings that, they were pretty decent dudes when they got there. Mm-hmm. So that makes a big difference too.
Like Warner is such a good place to develop as a young man. Like myself, my thoughts going in, my maturity coming into Warner is totally different with my, coming out. The perspective of the world, my worldview absolutely changed when I got there. And it just helped me, like you said, your coaching style, control the things that you can control. And, I was thinking about that all the time. We heard it probably 6-7 times a week at practice. But getting into, some other things, you control a lot of things, Coach. You have, baseball. You have, your faith that you're very strong involved with your church here downtown. But, you also have the cattle, right? How, you wanna talk about that?
Yeah, how do you kind of juggle all three of those things all into one, one day?
Well, and honestly, first of all, I mean, I'm so small potatoes with cattle. I mean, I'm not even a guy to really be talking to about cattle, but there's no trouble juggling it. I mean, Warner is my priority. That's my job. That's who employs me. That's what I love to do the most. I mean, so there's no challenge in juggling. My focus is on Warner, and then in other times, if I have time, and I try to kind of schedule it like that, that's when I can do the cattle and get out there with the animals and enjoy that. But so there's no juggling with it, but still, it's something that I do enjoy, and I'll be out there probably this afternoon too. So.
Yeah, one of my favorite memories from college is, I think it was my sophomore year, and we're all sitting around waiting for practice to start, and we're like, "Where's Coach at?" And it's been about 15 minutes, or whatever. He pulls up and he's like, "Sorry, fellas, I'm late. I had a couple of heifers struck by lightning." Yeah. And for a Polk County boy to hear that, like, it's okay, understandable. But we've got guys from the Dominican Republic, all over the country, and the faces that they made when they heard it.
They didn't believe you. They didn't believe you at all. But, something
well, and it's and you know, Nathan, that being around cattle with your family, they're big into case you have your family up here talking to them about cattle, but that's part of it. I mean, especially in Florida.
Oh yeah.
I mean, if you go through a summer and you didn't have an animal die by a lightning strike, you feel pretty good about that.
Right.
So it happens, and then you kind of have to deal with that. I mean, you don't just want to leave that animal out in the middle of your pasture. You at least want to kind of get it
Take
out
care
of the
of it.
pasture somehow. But when something like that happens, I mean, you have to deal with it. I remember calling our Dawn Meadows was her name. She was over athletics a few years back, and I told her, I said, I actually had her coming out to share with the team on that day. And I think she did come out that day, actually. And I called her and I said, Miss Dawn, I so apologize that I had a bull get out, out of a pasture.
I remember this.
And I said, I got to get this bull back in. And so, which took a while and everything, and I got there right at the end. But every now and then something like that happens and you have to deal with it. But, that's the exception more so than the norm. But those type of things do happen, yeah.
I've, you mentioning my family is in the cattle industry. I've seen a lot of crazy things happen. Cows are weird animals. What are some of the experiences that you have seen on your place?
Well, I tell you, it still amazes me to think about this story today, but I had a pasture that I was leasing down in Arcadia, and this was on Thanksgiving break. And so the guy called me that owned the pasture that I leased it from. He called me from down there. His name was Steve. Well, again, still is Steve Hall. But so Steve calls me and says, hey, he says, you got a cow down here that is trying to have a calf, but I think it's breech and she can't have it. If you want to come down here, I'll help you pull it. And so in my head, I'm kind of saying, oh, man, I just, I don't want to go pull that calf. But that's what you get up and go.
Yeah.
And so we go down there, and I'm in the pasture by myself, and he described the cow to me. And, of course, all of my cows at that, they were red, and they looked very similar. So it's kind of hard to distinguish, well, which one is he talking about?
Yeah.
I found a cow that had had a calf in the last day or two. I said, oh, well, she must have had it. And so I'm in there and I'm doing some other stuff, and Steve comes in and he's on a golf cart, and he comes in, he's talking to me, and hey, that cow have her calf? And I said, yeah, this is it right here. And so we talked for a few minutes, and he kind of squints his eyes and looks out over the pasture, and he says, you know what, there's that cow way out there. He pointed to her and so I'm looking and I'm trying to see what he's seeing. He says, come on, we'll get in the golf cart and go over there. So we go over there, and we're sure as anything, she can't have the calf is breech. And so I'm sitting there saying, oh, man, what are we going to do now? He says, well, listen, okay, you drive the golf cart, and I'll be on the back, and I'll lasso the cow off of the golf cart. And I'm saying, what? Lasso the cow off the golf. He says, yeah, just pull up there beside her. We'll be able to get up beside her. I says, we're not going to be able to get up beside that cow in a golf cart. He said, no, it'll work. Get on the, go ahead and do it. So I'm in the golf cart. I'm trying to, and of course the cow's now running away from you. I'm trying to, and this pasture, it had been farmland before, so it had like irrigation ditches. Right. And so the golf cart's going down in the irrigation ditch and up, and down in the irrigation ditch and up. And so I finally get close enough to this cow. He's a little closer, and he's on the back of the golf cart. He says, now when I rope her, put the brakes on, we'll pull the rope tight, and then you got to get out, and you go for her head, and I'll get to the back end. And so that's what happened. He roped her, we pulled it tight, get out, run down the rope like we were, doing calf roping at the rodeo and everything. And I got to her head, we, pulled her, put my elbow around her nose and pulled her down this way, and he pulled her down the other way, and I got her head held down, and he ends up pulling the calf, right out in the middle of the pasture. So, there you go. I mean, that's one of the most, I still am amazed by that story that he could have done that.
Now, is this have you been doing this your whole life? I forgot to ask that. Have you been a part of the cattle, this whole industry your whole life, or did you do this when you got older and you had the money to invest in it?
Well, I've always been around it my whole life. My dad, his passion was cutting horses, quarter horses. I mean, that was his passion. There's no doubt about it. But kind of go right alongside of that is beef cattle. And so my dad always had beef cattle. One of the things that just people that know me and know my dad know how much I love my dad. And he passed away a few years ago, but how much I admired him and what an indescribable influence he had in my life. So he had horses, he had cattle, and when he kind of tried to nudge me that direction, and I wasn't really drawn to it. I wasn't that interested in it when I was a kid. I wanted to play sports. And so when he recognized that I was serious, I really wanted to play sports, well, he sold everything. He sold his horses, he sold his cattle, and then he got involved in like Lake Wells Little League down here. And as I shared with you guys earlier, he became president of Lake Wells Little League when I was a kid. When I got done with all the way through high school. So when I got done with high school, went to college, he stepped out of Little League, started buying horses back, started buying cows back, and got back into it. So I was around it my whole life. I was never that interested in it. But as I shared that he passed away a few years ago, I mean, he was probably the last 10 or 12 years of his life. I mean, he was heading in a direction that you knew he wasn't going to, eventually something was going to have to happen.
Yeah.
And so I went ahead and figured I was going to need to learn this because I was going to have to do something, with my dad's cows later. And I figured the best way to do that was to have my own. Mm-hmm. And so I did end up purchasing some cattle, and I probably bit off too big of a bite. I ended up, getting too many, probably more than I needed to get.
It's a big responsibility.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, and I didn't quite realize that. So you work through that, but in doing that and really doing it just so I felt like I would know what to do when my dad passed or I needed to do something with his cattle, I just fell in love with that. I had really, just enjoyed the cattle, and I enjoyed, anticipating calves being born. I enjoyed, matching up, this breed of bull with these type of crossbred cows and seeing what you can come up with out of that. I enjoy that aspect of it. And so it's not this, like I said, it's honestly probably is more of a hobby for me. It's not really where my priority is, but I do enjoy it when I get time to, just like everybody's got things they like to do.
Got their little hobbies.
So, yeah.
I definitely can relate to that. I grew up, I played baseball and football my whole life, and I always said, my family was in agriculture, and I wanted to get an ag degree, but it wasn't necessarily something I was very passionate about going into college. It was just like, well, my family does this, so I'll go do it too. Until I got to college. When I got to college, it was kind of cool to see my transition from being, absolutely in love with baseball to kind of, moving in that direction where it's like I'm absolutely invested in the field I want to go to and absolutely love it. I know a lot of times whenever you're out, on the pasture, riding your horse, hunting, sitting in a tree stand or whatever, there's always, for me at least, you look across and you're like, wow, like this is so beautiful. Like, it reflects back to my faith, and as a Christian, it's like the Lord, put all this out for display for all of us. Have you had any of those experiences, in your time in the outdoors, or can you, reflect off of that?
Absolutely. No doubt. When you were saying that, I was thinking of a specific time with my dad. He had a pasture that was down like south of where CVS drugstore is over there. And so, and there was a hill, and his barn was at the top of the hill, and so he had horses. He had a few cows out there, but it was mostly horses out there. And so I was out there with him one afternoon, and we're just kind of standing there and just hanging out together. And he looks, and of course, the sky has all these colors in it from sunset, and it had rained earlier in the day, and it was just beautiful. And my dad said, he says, I don't see how anybody could look at something like that and come even close to believing that there was not a God. How could they even do that? And I've had that experience myself, and I've heard people talk about, the Lord paints a different picture, every night. And Scripture talks about that. I mean, it talks about, we'll know Him in His creation. His creation reflects His glory. His creation reveals His presence. Different places in Scripture it talks about when you look and you see a beautiful world, and you're able to live in a place like this, that it should point you towards looking towards the Lord. We came out of the gym. This is back right before Christmas, and I mentioned Dave Moskovitz, my associate head coach, and we came out of the gym. It was late in the day, And as we're coming out, Dave's in front of me, and he steps out the door, and he stops, and he is just kind of looking, and the sky was this kind of pinkish, orangish, just the whole western sky was like that, and the sun had already set. And he was just looking at it for a second, and I came out behind him saying, what is he looking at? And I'm looking, I'm saying, and I told him, I said, it's pretty awesome, isn't it? You know, that's the Lord. That's the Lord painting a beautiful picture for us, you know, to see on that day and remind us of who he is.
You know, it's no secret that you're a strong, you know, passionate follower of Jesus Christ. You know, when did you, you know, dedicate your life to the Lord? When did this start? Like,
well, I mentioned my mom and dad. My mom and dad, you know, most amazing people that I've ever known. And my mom's, you know, still living. Like I said, I can see the house across the lake there. They instilled, you know, a love for the Lord in me. I mean, when I was like Rod Schaefer, former football coach here, he talks about when he was a kid, you know, that he had a drug problem. And that the drug problem is that every time the church's doors were over, his parents drug him to church. And so I can relate to that because that's how it was with me. My parents had me in church. I go to First Baptist Church up here. I grew up in that church. I came in contact with so many strong believers, people that spoke the truth of the gospel and of salvation through Jesus Christ into my heart, countless numbers of folks. And in going through that, I remember I was 9 years old. I realized there was something I needed to do. I wasn't quite sure of it, but I knew that I had something related to the Lord. There was something I needed to know God stronger than I did even as a 9-year-old. And I told my mom when they did the altar call that day, I wanted to go down front. She said, do you know what you're doing? You know what's going on? I said, yeah, I believe I do, you know. So I went down. They had the altar call. They don't have altar calls much anymore. But when they had the altar call, I went down into our pastor and I said, I love Jesus and I want to be just like him. Now, that's a fine aspiration, but just like him, no. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do that, but because I'm not Jesus. So, but I knew that I wanted a relationship with him. I wanted to know him. I wanted to have him, you know, as the Lord of my life. And as I grew older, some of these same people, I would have questions. I remember I asked when I was in middle school, I said, you know, when Jesus was crucified and they put the crown of thorns on his head and they stabbed him in the side with a spear. I said, you know, he was God. So did he really feel that? And they told me, said, oh, absolutely he did, because he was 100% man. He was 100% God. And that math doesn't add up, but it does, because that's who he was. And so I would accept that and embrace that in my life. And so it's all of these people around me, starting off with my parents, and the influence they've had is what's encouraged me in my faith and allowed me to grow into a more fully developed, intimate walk with Christ. That is the most important thing in my life.
Yeah, definitely. You talked about how your parents had to drug you to church growing up. You know, as a Christian, you know, the Bible says that you will face trials and tribulations throughout your life. It's not going to be a cakewalk. You know, from a Christian speaking to a Christian, how do you handle some of those, you know, tribulations that you go throughout the time?
Well, and unfortunately, I'd have to say in some of those times in my life, not very well. Plenty of times that I've messed up and not been able to kind of step up and do what I needed to do in situations like that. But, you know, as what I would consider still a growing believer, I think I'll be growing in my faith as long as I live. And you talked about trials and tribulations, you know, in the book of James, like chapter 1, verses 3 through 4, 5, I believe it is. It says, count it all joy when you encounter trials and tribulations, because it serves for the building of your faith. And it says that endurance must do its part so that we may grow mature and complete, lacking in nothing. And so what a paradox to say, count it all joy when you encounter trials and tribulation? When you have rough times and tough times, be joyful about that?
Yeah, it's hard.
I mean, who comes up with something like that? You know, so but that's what the Lord teaches us there in James. And so the challenge is there to recognize when tough times come along. Nothing comes along by accident. The Lord allows you to go through different situations and different challenges and different difficulties because in those difficulties, if we trust Him in them and we seek Him in those opportunities, that He'll help us to grow in our faith and we will become more mature and more complete. And so it really is all about perspective and how you see those things when they come your way. It doesn't make them any easier. And as Christians, we aren't exempt from anything. You know, we encounter difficulties and tough times as same as anybody else. It's just we have a source in the master and creator of the universe that we can tap into to help us navigate through those times.
You know, you're very, very, educated on the Bible. You're very, strong in faith. Like, I want to get there one day where you're at. But, if you had to, tell a non-believer, like, what would you say to them to kind of make them believe? If you had one sentence to say to somebody like that, what would you say?
Well, that's an interesting question. One sentence. I think probably what I would say is that the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord, and that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, but that if we confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in our hearts that God has raised Him from the dead, you will be saved.
Yeah.
And that's not just sentences. That's basically 3 different scriptures from Romans meshed into one sentence. But I would want to let them know that we're all separated from God by our sin, and that Jesus died on the cross to pay the penalty for our sin, that He showed that He had power over death and hell and Satan and sin and the grave by virtue of Him rising from the dead of His own volition, and that He sits at the right hand of God now. And so by surrendering our heart to Him, confessing our sins, repenting from them, and committing our hearts and trusting Jesus for our salvation, the Scripture's very clear that we'll be saved. So
I love that. I love that.
I know.
Do you want to get into snap questions now?
Yeah, I do. Some of the, what we do at the end of our episodes is when we're trying to signify that we're wrapping it up and whatnot, we ask our guests snap questions. So it's kind of like, things off the top of our head that we come up with, try to get, a good side of your personal, away from the baseball field, away from the church, and off the cattle ranch. Our first question for you is one that we ask every single episode with all of our guests. If you could have 3 people throughout the history of time at a dinner table with you, who are they and why?
Oh,
That's pretty on the spot, too.
That is pretty on the spot. It's a bit challenging. Well, one of them, no doubt, would be Bart Starr. And Bart Starr was the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers back in the late 50s and 60s. And as you guys know, I'm a huge Packers fan. When I was a kid, my parents, knowing that I liked Bart Starr, they sent one of these little footballs that cheerleaders throw out at halftime at the games into the crowd. And they asked him, they sent it up there and asked him to sign it. Well, he signed it. And not only did he sign it, he sent back an 8.5 by 11 picture of himself that he wrote a message out on and signed and in a frame and sent that back.
That's
and
awesome.
Then a year later, I got like a manila envelope in the mail. I'm 8 years old. This is, got a little manila envelope in the mail, and it had pictures of all of the entire team of the Green Bay Packers at that time. Now, the one thing that would never happen now. There's no way. That does not happen anymore. But here was a man of great faith that played a sport that I loved, and as much as I love baseball, I probably am a little bigger football fan than I am a baseball fan. And so, I would definitely love to have a meal with Bart Starr. So, I think another one would probably. I'd probably enjoy having a meal with Abraham Lincoln.
We've had that before. Yeah.
I view Abraham Lincoln as our greatest president for multiple reasons. I mean, the history books tell us, he changed America more than any president in the entire history of our country. So I would enjoy having a meal with Abraham Lincoln. And then I think the third person would be the Apostle Paul.
Okay. Okay.
The Apostle Paul wrote so much of the New Testament. He saw Jesus face to face. He was caught up, into the third heaven it talks about, and saw Jesus face to face. I would love to have lunch or dinner with the Apostle Paul and pick his brain. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a cool 3. That's a unique 3. We've had Biggie Smalls, the rapper, last week. We've had, Jesus Christ before.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan.
Michael
Derek
Jordan.
Jeter,
Yeah. We've had, that's
Robin Williams.
That's a unique 3. I know you're a huge Packers fan too. When I walk into your office, I see all the stuff over the wall. So I was like, I knew one of them was going to be from the Packers.
So our next question, I want to ask you, if you could give one piece of advice to two 23-year-old guys like Brian and I, what would you tell us?
Yeah, I figured that the 23-year-old guys, that had to be probably you two. Well, I tell you, what I would tell you to do, I think, is go read Proverbs 31, the 31st proverb. And it basically,
write that down real quick.
Yeah, Proverbs 31. In Proverbs 31, it talks about what a godly wife looks like. Every aspect of who she is and what she's about and so on. Read that, memorize it, understand it, and then go find someone who mirrors exactly what it says in Proverbs 31. And if you can somehow talk her into being attracted to you at all, then latch onto her and never, ever let her go.
Yeah, you found yours. You and Miss Margie are, as tight as they come.
It's like a dream couple. They had a dream.
Yeah.
I love Miss Margie too.
She is the biggest blessing that God ever gave to me. I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, we have been married for 35 years. She is the most important person in my life. She has helped shape me. She's helped me kind of grow up from being probably still an older kid when we met to being better than I was then for sure. And so she's the biggest blessing in my life. I love her with all my heart, and I thank the Lord every day that He gave her to me, because she, not just because of all those reasons, but she gave to me the 3 greatest kids I could have ever had, and so proud of. So yes, definitely. I definitely have my Proverbs 31 wife.
Okay, we're going to read that right after I get off the stage. My girlfriend's down here watching us. I'm going to be like, hey, Coach said it, you better. Nate, you want to take the next one, or you want me to get it?
Oh, you got
it. $100,000 nowadays, well, it's not a lot of money, but it's enough money to invest in something to start, or pay off bills or whatever. If me and Nate gave you $100,000, what would you do with it, and why?
Well, the first thing I would do is I'd tithe at least 10% of it, to our church. That's biblical. That's what we're instructed to do, and so I would do that. I'd pay off our mortgage. Go ahead and get that thing finished off and get it taken care of, and then the rest of it I would want invested in something that hopefully provided a consistent, maybe passive income, and something that we could kind of use and benefit from over a long period of time. And like you say, yeah, 100,000 is not, it's still a lot of money to me, but that's not still, it's not a huge, quick. It can go in a hurry. Yeah.
It's funny because you say that. We've had people come on when we've asked that question. You're like, yeah, I just blow it. I want to get a new truck. I want to do this and that with it. I'm like, man, you look at the new F-150s right now. They're sitting at like $75,000. There goes 3/4 of it.
But so our next question is, so for those of y'all that know Coach Sikes, you know his notorious truck. And it's this white Chevy 2500 Duramax, no tailgate, got a couple dings and scratches. Very couple. But he loves it. And he's just known by it. If you could have any vehicle in the world, or like dream vehicle, what's your dream vehicle?
Yeah, I've never been a guy that really cared that much about a particular vehicle or anything fancy. For me, if it gets me from point A to point B and, accomplishes what I need it to do en route or when I get there, that works for me. I don't really aspire to some big fancy vehicle. Like, I didn't drive the truck today. I told you guys that because the heater doesn't work in it. So, I drove a different vehicle here so I could stay warm. But it's never been that big a deal to me.
Speaking of his truck, one time we were heading home. It was after a game this past spring, and I was going out. It was late. It was like 11, right after the game. I was hungry. I was going to McDonald's, the only thing open. And I pull off on, I believe it was ABC Road, and I'm heading towards, that area. And I see a white Silverado on the side of the road with his hazards lights on. And I'm like, that's Coach. That is Coach. It's like, I got to do something. So I pull over and I stop, cut my headlights or whatever, get out of my truck, and I start walking up. And Coach, you're sitting there on your phone, window up, I guess not enjoying the heater. But I knocked on your window, and the look that you gave me, it was like, I will never forget. You jumped and looked at me, and I just thought that was a funny story because you say it gets me to point A to point B. Well, I think got you to half of A at that point when you were going home.
The midpoint.
It got me to A- at that. Yeah. I remember that, Brian. That scared me to death. I was just, I remember over here, I'll sometimes, I can't say I've never texted while driving. I don't want to be, disingenuous here. But I remember I was on the east side of town over there, and I pulled over in front of a guy's house, same thing, and I'm texting on the phone, and the guy walks up to me, and, same thing, knocks, and it startles you. And he says, "Can I help you?" Because he wondered, what's this stranger parking right in front of my house? I said, "Oh, no, I'm sorry." I said, "I was just texting."
Yeah.
He says, "Oh, I really appreciate you doing that." Now, I didn't tell him, well, probably 3/4 of the time I wouldn't have pulled over, but this particular time I did, and that particular time too. But yeah, you definitely startled me that night. I wasn't ready for it.
You want to take the last one?
I got it. All right, Coach. You're born and raised right here in the beautiful town of Lake Wales, and you've been to Kentucky for college. You went to Mississippi State to play ball, and you've been down to Avon Park. If you could go anywhere in the world, for a couple days just to kick back and relax, where would you go?
My wife and I actually were talking about this about a week and a half ago. Is that I would want to go to the Holy Land.
Okay.
Yeah. I would love to go to the place where Jesus walked. I would love to climb up Calvary, the mountain that he was crucified on. I would just like to see the things that he saw. I would like to see the Sea of Galilee that he walked on the water. I would love to experience all of that. I've known plenty of people that have done that, and they tell me it's just unlike any other place they've been to. But just as a believer and a follower of Christ, I would, if I could pick one place, that would be the place. Yeah.
I was talking, me and Reagan were talking about that the other day. I told her, I was like, I've always wanted to, I would love to go there just to see all that stuff, see the walls and see it's literally history alive and still well. I don't know. I think that I'm on board with you. I would love to go there too and check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a article one time where apparently that in the Red Sea they have seen these shapes of coral underneath it that were shaped like chariot tires that kind of looked like a table because they were on their side. But it's kind of cool that they go down there and find stuff like that, and it kind of just relates just back to the Bible because whenever Moses parted the Red Sea and then imagine that you find a chariot wheel at the bottom, it's like, well, that's kind of leading to exactly what the Bible said, so that's pretty cool.
There's tons of archaeological finds all over the world that match up with Scripture and things that Scripture said happened there. And so just, more evidence of
that it's there.
The Lord's presence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one last final snap question for you. We don't really ask any of our guests this, but, you are very deep into your faith. Coach, you never really told us, while we were there the 4 years, what's your favorite Bible verse? You've always bounced around and told us different ones, but you never gave us your one that you always refer back to.
Sure. I think my favorite verse is probably Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. And it says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything through prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God that passes all understanding will guard your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ our Lord." So it basically speaks to there's no sense to fret or worry about anything. The Lord has it. And when we make requests, when things are on our heart and we make requests to the Lord, he says, make your requests known to God with thanksgiving. So we need to be thanking the Lord for what he's going to do in that situation, even before he's done it. And even though whether we know it's going to be what we're hoping he's going to do or something different, we thank him for it because he has our best in mind. He wants what's best for us. And so Philippians 4, 6, and 7, I think that would be my favorite verses.
You know, Coach, we kick off every episode. I just remembered this. We got right off going, and we ask all of our guests this question at the very beginning of our episode. It's our title, and I cannot believe we got into conversation rolling off the bat. Coach, what is your number one rule to live by?
Number one rule to live by?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think I kind of alluded to it when we talked about recruiting. My rule to live by is that I want to glorify Jesus Christ. Is what I'm doing or what I'm contemplating doing or what I'm going to do, is it going to be something that God is going to be pleased with, that he's possibly placed in front of me? Is it going to bring glory and honor to him? And if it's something that I look at and I say, I don't see how God gets any glory from that, I'm probably not going to do it. I want him to receive the glory in my life. And I am, human, and I mean, I have my difficulties and challenges. I was one of those sinners saved by grace. I mean, I'm not a foreigner to, what sin looks like in someone's life, my own in particular. But I'm a sinner saved by grace. Jesus saved me. He has given me an eternal home in heaven through my faith in him, and I look forward to that. So my responsibility as a believer here is to live a life that hopefully brings glory and honor to him. And I'm convicted when I mess up and feel like I'm not doing that, and encouraged when maybe I feel, okay, I'd like to think maybe that did honor the Lord there. That's what I certainly aspire to do. I wish I could do it every time, but that's what my goal is, every day of my life. Yeah.
Definitely a unique one. We haven't had that before, man.
I can't believe we forgot to ask that.
I know. It's our title of our show.
The name of the podcast.
Yeah.
But we just want to thank everybody for coming out today. Thank Miss Chicken for giving us this opportunity. Thank you, Coach Sikes, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me.
We want to encourage everybody to support your local business, support all the barbecue stands, go buy a bunch of food, get all the drinks, have a great time, be responsible.
And I just want to shout out the KT Foundation is awesome. What they do, the scholarships they offer to adults and high school students, and all the things that they do, and all the money that goes for the families that have been affected by certain circumstances that the KT Foundation covers. It's just a really cool event. It's a really cool thing, and I'm so blessed to be out here with my partner, a guy that had so much influence on me and Nate the last 4 years growing up, coming into young men. Coach, thank you so much for coming out today. You were the perfect guest for the perfect spot right here in Lake Wales. I love you, Coach. Thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy. Love you guys, too. Appreciate it.
And if y'all liked what you hear today, we are on all social medias. You can listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and that's Rule the Number 1 podcast. And we're on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, just about everything you could think of.
All of them.
So we want to thank y'all for listening. And
have a great rest of the day. Enjoy some good barbecue and some awesome music, guys.
Yes,
thank you.